Okay, so hello, everyone. I am joined today by the artistic director of Teatro Luna, Meda, and her company. If you all could go around and introduce yourself, I would highly appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Kelley Williamson. I'm an ensemble company member and also part of the leadership team of Teatro Luna.
Sorry, stop, Elizabeth.
You're totally fine.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Nungaray, and I am an ensemble part of the leadership team of Teatro Luna. Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Igaraividez, also part of the leadership team and creative producer at Teatro Luna. Okay, I'd like to get this interview started. So let me put up my first couple of questions. Okay, so I would like to first start this question directed at Alex, and then afterwards we can go around because I think this is a general question that anybody can answer. But what was your upbringing like, and what parts of your identity did you explore early on, whereas some of the other parts of your identity that came much later?
Ooh, we're like just going in. First question. Okay. All right. So I'm the child of immigrant parents. So I think that's probably like the largest impact on my upbringing, right? Is that I had two parents who were not born in this country. I grew up pretty poor, which I think also had a really big impact. Fluctuating classes, actually, I think is actually really more specific. And because of that, because I was able to see like the real difference in what money allows for lives and families, I think that had a really huge impact in maybe where I'm at now, what my values are, where my political alignment is, why I'm obsessed with having a stocked fridge because, trauma. But I also, but because of that, I grew up also, I had family that had a lot of money. And so seeing the differences, is something that I just am really dedicated to thinking about at all times, right? It's like really, when we talk about intersectionality, like I'm going to admit it, like my bias is always leaning to like class in terms of economic inequity. So I grew up in Miami. I think that's also like growing up in a minority majority place. So I didn't necessarily have to contend with my Latinidad as an other until I left Miami. And I spent a lot of time in Orlando. And I would say that's really where I learned what I would call that I'm a white Latina now today, right? But like at the time, I was just this sense of like, not here, not there, not right, hairy like a Latina, but skin so light, right? Microaggressions. But I think that led to a sense of an outsider, which led to a sense of a rebel, which led to a sense of like, I'm gonna motivate people to be louder, angrier, honest. And I would say like that brand for me remains today. I don't know if that answers your question, but hopefully a little bit.
That was a wonderful answer to my question. Thank you very much. Who would like to go next?
It's funny. We always like do like a pass. We're like, oh, okay, next to it. And so I'm like, oh, okay, anyone? Let me make space. So, yeah, I grew up on the south side of Chicago. And I always say south side of Chicago because there are different Chicagos here. And like I am a child of immigrant parents. I would like to call brown down Chi-town. And I think for me, it's always been part of reclaiming a narrative, whether my brown skin, whether how I look, whether when I say I'm from a certain neighborhood in Chicago, there's already a narrative that is spun around me, about me. And so that is something that I think when it comes to theater, I didn't know what it was. And I didn't realize that what I was always thinking about, like, I always thought of myself as very politically active. My dad would take me to meetings for like the neighborhood council. And so for me, that was always something I wanted to do. I'm like, no, we got to show people, not show people, but always like reclaiming that narrative or fight for something, right? And so for me, I didn't know that like reclaiming a narrative, reclaiming a story was theater. I always thought that's something that white people did, rich white people did, and and so when I found out what it was, what I did, I was like, oh man, I kind of like this. How do you make a, is this a smart decision? Is this a wise decision? But then I was like, I really like it. So here I am. So I think in a way, I think anytime anyone asks like, so how does it is this thing like you are where you come from or you are what you become. And that's something that a game that we used to play with like teaching students or whatever, like this spectrum exercise. It's always like this always, you get to create and craft, but that's something that always builds you. And that's why I really like theater.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer.
Yeah, I grew up in I guess middle upper class Black household, and so going to like predominantly white private schools, and so before I knew what it was, like microaggressions were happening all the time, and so you couldn't really. I was just frustrated and insecure a lot, and was very aware of being Black, but couldn't be like, oh, that's racist, because it wasn't like, oh, like you nigger or something like that, or like it was just very like small little things that now then once I got into college, it was like a whole new world. Actually, like one of my best friends who's this like amazing like biracial like Jewish Spanish badass in my life, she's like, girl, like you Black, right? Like just like, and it seems like but it was just great. I just loved like college is when I really like kind of came into my being as a Black woman, and also understanding like light skin privilege and class and I feel like I did a lot of work to break the chains of like white assimilation, of like trying to be the best white girl that I could be, to being grounded in my authentic Black womanhood. And that has really shaped, I've always loved my people. There's never been any doubt about that. I think my family, not intentionally, but I think like there's this unintentional desire in a lot of like Black households, particularly like upper middle, to like assimilate and to get the career and the job and the house and like the education and kind of be the best like Black version of white success. And so that's still kind of, it's getting better, but I think from then on, my identity has been something that I've worked really really hard at to reclaim. I feel like it's always been there, but I think it's just work that like my ancestors were like, we got to bring this back into the family and like break some generational curses. And but it's interesting because in quarantine, my mom reading bell hooks and which is huge, and finally understanding what I've been going through, because there was a lot of resistance. And so it's nice to kind of have a little bit more support from my family than before. And I love theater. I have theater to thank for all that, really, as well.
Thank you for that answer. I totally was with you almost the whole time, because I'm also a middle class, African-American woman. And I also went to like a predominantly white high school. And I was like, y'all, I did choose going to that school. I chose differently than my twin brother. He wanted to like stay in the public system so that he could stay with like his friends, and they had a good engineering program. Whereas I was like, yo, this little private school over here has an amazing theater program, and that's what I have my eye on. So I did choose going there, but it was still like a little out of my element, you could say, and a lot of difficult lessons that I had to learn along the way in regards to like microaggressions, like you were saying, and sort of having to code switch as well.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
Christina, would you like to share?
Oh, sure. And feel free. We don't all have to answer, so we don't hold things up too. Um, but really quickly, I also grew up on the far south side of Chicago, probably much further than Elizabeth. Not that it's a contest, but people usually don't know that my neighborhood even exists if you're from Chicago. And I have to. I was just thinking a lot as I was hearing all your answers. I always learn something new whenever we do one of these things, so I love it personally. And I feel I have been really uh, lucky and fortunate in. Oh, sorry, my mom's talking. Okay, fortunate in a lot of ways that I had been constantly surrounded by people who were unlike me very early on, and that was my norm growing up. And from growing up, I mean really junior high and on, because I grew up in a mostly Latinx and Black neighborhood, and white people near me were always in the minority and were the ones getting picked on actually in school. So I was like, yeah, I'm the majority. What? And my Latina-ness was never really in question until probably after college. I feel like when I was never really aware of issues, that really affected our communities at large of color and Latinx communities that I just wasn't paying attention to until I found theater, until I found Teatro Luna, or Teatro Luna found me, however you want to call it. I find that I've always been in life invited to things in order to discover them, and all those invitations were things that I've always deeply wanted to be a part of, but never had the courage or bravery to do it myself. So it wasn't until someone said, hey, you should try an improv class. Hey, you should check out this Latina theater company, that I was like, yes, I should. And almost like 90% of those invitations have been proven to be things that I've always needed to do. So thankful for that. And I am a grandchild of immigrants, which also brought a whole other layer compared to my friends growing up too. Like my mom doesn't sound like that, and an only child as well. So it was just always interesting to see, the generational differences between the people that I surrounded myself to, but never feeling less than or that different. Just my problem of just assuming everyone was Mexican that I like, who looked like me, was like a big learning in college, because there are a lot of Mexicans in Chicago. But the first time I was on the L with a girl from college, and I was like, oh yeah, you know what it's like because you're Mexican. She's like, I'm Colombian. I don't know what you're talking about. And I was like, oh, there's others. Got it. But that's how I learn things, just saying my things out loud. I was not embarrassed because I didn't know any better. But yeah, just a little about me. Yes, I love theater.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing answer. Going on to my next question. Where did you study / get some sort of professional training?
I'll kick off. So I went to, well, first of all, I credit my high school with a lot better training than my university experience. I'm actually gonna credit. I went to school in Orlando, Dr. Phillips High School. It was a school that had a really special theater magnet program. So I was able to get bussed in there, which was amazing, and really is what I credit with like changing my life. I don't think I would have gone into theater had it not been for this program. And through the program, I was able to go to the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh for the first time. We went on a Northeastern college tour. Like, had it not been for that, I don't think I would have understand really like, oh, people go to school for theater, right? Like people, like this is a thing, right? In the way that provided me. So I really credit that. I ended up going to DePaul University, and I started in the theater management program. I totally hated it. I moved into theater arts, also totally hated it. I felt it was not as rigorous as my high school, and I was like, also, it's changed a lot. The diversity has changed a lot, but at the time, I think there were like maybe 4 people of color in the whole school, and it was just like, I was not about that life. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to get another degree in American studies. And I'm going to really focus on like anthropology and American studies, which is really looking at race and theory and all that good stuff. And I would say like, that is where I really actually like served me so much more for what I would be doing with Teatro Luna than anything else. But I do credit the theater school with, actually I don't. But I ended up doing a second internship at a second university, at a second theater, and that second theater happened to be Teatro Luna. That's how I found Luna, because it was a recommendation from the first theater that I was at, About Face Theater, which is one of the country's like biggest queer theaters. And had it not been for, so I thank the theater department for that. Like that's how it put me on the path. Everything else was about I don't understand how these institutions get to teach us when they are erasing the fullness of what the theater field is and only really looking at a very small strata of regional theater and Broadway. And the theater is so much fuller than that. And I think until the theater schools change, we are pumping out people who are wasting thousands of dollars and they don't even learn what the field is. So like, that's my rant over. Yeah. And I've been saying I'm going to go to grad school for the last 12 years of my life. I was like, as soon as the season's over and I have some time, and I haven't, but it's okay. One day.
Thank you for that. I was also like sort of considering grad school, and now that COVID's hit, I'm like, look, everything's off track. Can y'all give me a second? Like, I don't know anymore. Nothing, everything is up in the air. So I'm kind of on the same wavelength of you of like, maybe, I don't know. We'll figure it out later. Right now I'm focused on this, that sort of thing. Oh, does anyone else want to share about where they got some professional training? If not, we can just move on to the next question.
I want Elizabeth to talk about her first encounter with the Goodman. Thank you.
Okay, I was making space for folks because I
just think it's a different model, right?
Yes,
so yeah,
okay,
I'm curating. Okay, apologies.
I was gonna say something, but I was like, let me hold space. Okay, so a couple things. What is professional? And my theater school, I can rant all about it. I think what my college taught me, I went to Columbia. What my college taught me was that if I wasn't a white passing light-skinned Latina, I wouldn't get cast in things. And that is the biggest lesson. And that's what held true. I'm gonna be like really frank. And that I think still holds true, you know? And it also taught me that if I wanted to make my own space, I will have to create it and create that narrative. And I also found Luna in an internship, so similarly to Alex. So that's my little mini rant about school, college. And I double majored in cultural studies and theater. So in a similar way, like what taught me was about like the greater social consciousness and how theater is affected by that, and like culture at large, how the power it has. And I think that's the best gift that it taught me, of like just really seeing yourself as other people do. But aside from that, you know, you make of it what you do, as in life. So that's a great lesson. But in high school, I think I learned a lot more from teachers and let me just shout out Annie Joseph. Oh wait, that's not her name, Simons. And she was like my high school teacher who really pushed us to, I actually never left my neighborhood in Chicago. Like my school's like down the block and I never left it. So I never really left the South Side. And she's like, go to this theater downtown, the Goodman. I was like, what is this place? And it's a regional theater. And I was like, okay, fine. Like, I don't know where this is. There was no Google Maps. So I took the bus. I got lost on the way. I took another bus and I go there to audition. And like, and I was like, they're playing these weird games. They're improv games. I'm like, I don't know what this is. And so I get there and I get in. I'm like, okay, this is cool. All right. And like, I saw these like white kids and like these Black kids and these other brown kids. And I was like, we're all in the same room together. This is interesting, you know? And so like, I remember like all the white kids were like, oh my God, it's the Goodman. Oh, all this stuff. And I was like, what? You know, like I had no idea. But anyway, that is to say, I think I think the summer program that I was a part of ended up being a part of for like 6 years. Like every summer I ended up interning there, and that was where my first job was, and I started teaching there. And I had no concept of what it was or what it did. And like, to me, the core of it, and I met some incredible teachers and like incredible mentors there, especially like what Willa, she's a head of education there, what she creates there is like phenomenal. And I always stand it, even though I know like things are always problematic, but I stand. And I think at the core was ensemble, right? It is not about you, it is about the group and everything that is around. And I think what that really instilled in me, that there is no way, I love that you said you do a little bit of everything, right? Because that's really what it taught me. Like any part of the theater, I've done, right? Some way, somehow, have done, like either through Luna or through my education, which I actually really thank the Goodman for, and like other programs, other internships, where the lessons really lied. Where I'm like, I've done from front of house to being on stage to doing admin work, and you know, there's strengths and weaknesses everywhere, but you find it, you know? And say that because I'm not the best administrator, but I'm really great at community engagement. But like that's what it is. I think that's what theater is. It's not about you, it is about what you really want to bring.
Thank you. I really like the idea of all of you working together and doing each of the little bits of parts to make the full sort of like scope and production worthy levels that you're able to accomplish. I also want to thank you about bringing up professional training, because that's on me. Probably should have fixed the word usage to just training, because unfortunately the world is like, only this counts as professional, or only this counts as professional in my eyes. And like, you know, there's a lot of things where you can get training from somewhere else, like let's say a camp, or like I did this job and it really impacted me in being able to be where I am today and sort of like have this mind space or mindset. So I'd like to clarify myself that way. But Kelley, if you'd like to share a little bit about your training and where you went and got some.
Yeah, I definitely like kind of like Elizabeth, like my high school director, Dr. Jude Lucas, was extremely instrumental in just becoming a better actor and understanding theater more. And even after doing my like one-woman show, she helped me like kind of reconstruct it and stuff. And I always feel like theater is very it's like therapy. You kind of be able to figure out what in you is keeping you from doing the best in a role or being able to connect to a role. So Jude Lucas was in high school, and then college. I got my degree in international and intercultural studies with an emphasis in world religion. So nothing theater-like, but took theater and like, well, I took auditioned for a play, and I auditioned for College Girls, and probably one of the best experiences of my entire life. It was like a group of Black women from all different backgrounds, and at the time, our director, Shakina Nafat, at the time was a white Jewish gay male who identified as a Latina woman, there's a lot to unpack there, but is now trans and as a trans woman. But she was very instrumental in my growth as an actor at that time. The kind of work and intention was different from anything that, even like the audition process was different. We could bring in whatever. So I did like, I recited a poem for my first audition that I wrote. In the second audition, we sat in a circle and had to answer one of 5 questions. It was like, when was the first time you experienced sexuality? The first time you recognized you're a woman of color? The first time you found love? The first time you experienced heartache? And the first time or an encounter you had with God? And you had to answer any of those questions. And it was the most intense like auditions I'd ever been on. Crying and just emotional. And then it just really breathed life into the actual piece itself. And that was doing that play was a moment that I was like, I want to do theater, because the impact that it had on the audience and had on us, like we were told not to, every year there's a play, the community comes in, it's like these older white people, right? These very wealthy white people come watch the show and they're like, maybe you shouldn't do it because this is kind of a lot. And they loved it and they were moved and they were crying. And I'm like, God, like theater is such a powerful tool and vehicle to connect humans together, to around another human story. And then I went to grad school in London, and that was good. I was exposed to a lot of international artists, and the Brits are just brilliant at what they do. So that was also stretching as well. Of I have people coming at your life teacher telling me like, stop being a cheerleader on stage. I was like, what does that mean? She was like, stop caring what you look like. Like, she's like, just get raw, get ugly, get nasty. Like, you know, which is just like, oh, more therapy. But like, yeah. And then coming back like with Luna, like just having to, I think the way I've like been able to memorize, working like on instinct and intuition with like an ensemble and really listening. We're always told as actors to listen, but no one really listens or practices that. So really learned that with Luna as well. But yeah, that's my, yeah. And administration and behind the scenes, I'm furloughed now, but worked at the Pasadena Playhouse Theater. And I learned like what kind of decisions, why theaters make certain decisions on who they choose. And so a lot of it was like, okay, it's not personal, it's just financial. And all the things that go into selling tickets, really, at the end of the day, and trying to please donors and board members and get grants and stuff. So that's been really interesting as an artist to be on the administrative side there. And a lot of seeing directors and auditions and why they make the decisions that they make. It's really eye-opening. I think everyone should do it just because you kind of like, okay, I understand, I get it.
Thank you so much for that answer. And I have to say, as soon as you said For Color Girls, I was like, ah, and I like started freaking out because I used a monologue from For Color Girls, not only for like when I was auditioning for, of course, colleges as well, but also for like a festival, and I was able to get an award, and I was like, oh my gosh, yay. So it's For Color Girls has a little special place in my heart. So I was like, ah. And it's interesting because you actually answered like a little bit of like one of my next questions, which is like what has been a project or show that has had the most impact on you, and then possibly like you could see the impact on the people that you were working with or the people around you, and then as well as like the audience. So if any of you want to answer that question.
I could go with my obvious one. Obviously, I've loved everything Teatro Luna has created, whether or not I was in it or not. Oh, most likely not, because it has been around longer than I have been performing. But I can't, it's hard to pick one. I think the most recent project of well, okay, first I'll start with the easy one. Sorry. I started producing with Teatro Luna a live storytelling show called Talking While Female that was originally based on a traveling solo show that we ended up creating at our physical space in Boyle Heights, Studio Luna, as just a place for women of color and Latinas to share stories. We have been completely flexible on, format and content. We don't have any like no swearing or no talking about this. The only thing that kind of people align with is a theme of the evening, and it was a monthly storytelling show. I mean, it still is, but virtually, and a sometimes twice a month. I don't know how we did that. We did that several times, which is wild. And and I and it was just kind of like having a little show every month, and that did not require as much as a full on production, but it just every single story always blew me away, and the audiences we had, however little or big, it didn't matter. You could feel the vibration of their energies reciprocated back from the storyteller. It was a constant give and take exchange that I just can't really explain, but it's something I have yet to find anywhere else, in a space, and not even in this format, in other formats as well, because it also made people motivated to tell their own stories. A lot of folks in the audience afterwards were like ignited and like, oh my gosh, I have a story to tell too, and it was anyone from college students to internet influencers to playwrights to people who really did any kind of corporate work, like people who have never performed at all, and has just been a really magical experience, I'll say. But I'll let other people go as well.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to pipe in with their own answer sort of to the question. If not, I can move on, of course. I value your guys' time, so.
I mean, I think there's a part of me that wants to be like, I don't do a project unless I think it's going to be life-changing, but I think the project that I probably learned the most on was one that artistically I'm not like proud of it or anything, but it took us to Europe, and it took us to making risks and learning huge lessons that I think really inform the kind of leader and boss and director and friend that I am today, right? Like I learned all the things not to do while on that project. So that project was called Luna Unlaced, and it was a best of, like we essentially took the top 22 scenes of our first 13 years of work, with women who had not been part of that work originally, were only part of some of the later work, and we put together a show where people got to pick scenes. They would be given a menu and they got to pick the scenes, and the actors would have to do it randomly every night based on what the audience selected. So it was super fun. Super hard. It took us to like, I don't know, over 40 cities in the US and Europe. And it was a mess. It was a nightmare. It was a holy spiritual experience. And like I said, I tend to learn more when I mess up. I tend to learn more. And I think that's really when I became obsessed with failure as a thing that I needed to seek out rather than a thing I needed to stay away from. And I think that really, like I said, just really defined me. Not then, but like the me I am now, right? Like I had a lot to work out then, right? I was in my early 20s, and maybe I was in my late 20s and just such a point of growth for me. Yeah, so I'll name that one.
Thank you. So I know that a lot of Teatro Luna's sociology, I guess you could say, focuses around Latinx, Womanx, POC, and I was wondering, how do you all incorporate like the sort of like the intersectionality of all of these different identities, not only into like the plays and the stories that you share, but into the program as a whole?
Yeah, so a couple of things. I don't know at which point to start, but I think this is the easier entry point for me. Whenever we start a new project or really delve into a creative space, I think one of the most grounding and important things is like when we facilitate different trainings to whoever's involved. So I think most recently to the one where I was also facilitating was for the Times, where it's like how when we were first starting to develop it, it's like, okay, so we had some new folks coming in. And so we're like, okay, great. How do we build the language about what is an ensemble? But that also means anti-bias training, checking, because when we talk about Latinidad or people of color, BIPOC folks, everybody's enveloped under one different thing, right? And the different intersections of class, the different intersections of colorism, and the historical context within a world perspective through a very American perspective are all different things we have to negotiate and really be able to be vulnerable with and where we are. And I think that's something that we're really honest about is like, yes, we are all on a journey. And yes, we are all coming from different places and different backgrounds. But this is what our understanding, yes, it is in training and like, yes, physicality, yes, viewpoints. But actually, in order to be vulnerable, in order to really engage with the work that we want to do, which is like something that we were saying, like we're like from whatever it is, we are pro-working class, we're like, you know, like anti-cops, we're anti-ICE, we're all of this, like we are for abolish, you know, and I think everybody comes in from a different perspective and a different understanding. But as a company, it's like, you know, this is what we stand for, because any system that is meant to erase us is not for us, right? And we cannot create the work of imagining. I think one of the, and I don't want to go too much into like the trainings because we'll get to answer this, but looking at y'all. But I think when we think about creating when we're on stage, we're really going into the work of like exploration. When we explore, we get to imagine a place that we are free, right? And especially for BIPOC femmes of color, BIPOC femmes, like in order to imagine a world to be free, we also need to imagine how we get free, right? How do we imagine liberation? What does that look like, right? And like, I think within the first question you asked, like, oh, what are backgrounds, right? And that's something that we sometimes is very difficult, right? And sometimes and it's not like that we just talk about these issues, it is about just existing is our resistance, and just existing also brings into questions all these things when we all come together. So I'll leave that there, and yes, whoever wants to go next.
Thank you for that answer. This is such a phenomenal answer. I also like how you pinpointed about the work that you have to put in regards to like some of the classes and the anti-bias training that you have to take, because I think that's important. If you like, you know, of course, want to be advocating for certain things that you might not necessarily be a part of, being able to like have that form of understanding and that basis understanding in order to be able to like fully delve into the work. So thank you.
Yeah, I think I'll build, because I think what Elizabeth is talking about is really like what works for us is having a really clear understanding of our value systems, and not that every person has to have the same value set as the organization, but a clarity on this is where the organization stands and come and work with us, but this is where we stand. And these are the things we're going to talk about. And part of that is we are both an act of resistance and a site of healing. And to be those things, there is a vocabulary, there is a training, there is a methodology that has to take place. And so I think the express difference is where a lot of theaters are like, come and you are, remove your own personal histories and you are a body to enact other characters, right? Like, nah. Like, that's cool when we're all equal and we're all the same, but that's not reality. So we can get there. Like, we get there in our work where we imagine ourselves as anything and do it, like, but to start there is an erasure. And so we don't do that. So I think that's really important. I think what Elizabeth is talking about is really getting to an understanding of like, how are we all, I think what sets us apart, and we weren't always this way. This is like a sophistication that has happened over 20 years. Do you know what I mean? But what sets us apart from maybe some other theaters of color is we don't take for granted that because we're of color, we're not causing harm, right? And I think that has been the real turning point for us in the last 5 years, because I would say there's probably a lot of people out there who are like, well, the Teatro Luna I knew at a certain point was what. But like, this is how we grow as a community and the field, and theater's behind. It is learning from the social justice movement how to center humans, how to use art as a tool and not just a form of entertainment. So I think there's just been a lot of learning. But I think for us, we used to always talk about a safe space. Now we talk about a brave space. But we also can't expect people to just have these tools. So we see our art making as like also the place to provide you the tools for rigorous conversation and the development of your own opinion, right? Not that you have to have our opinion, you have to have your own opinion, but do you have the tools to even develop that, right? So that's, I just think, really important to name.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. The tools, that was I was like, yes, the tools, providing the tools. I very much appreciated that. Kelley, would you like to share next?
Sure. Yeah, I think a lot of it intersectionality comes from ensemble members being able to write and to share their pieces. So inherently you do have that intersectionality and you have different voices inserted in because we're able to share our experiences. And even if we don't particularly, if our piece doesn't end up in the show, at least during the process of while we're writing and we're working together, inherently it gets into the show. It opens dialogue and and allows that different perspectives to live in this space, and both physically but also in the work as well. And I also think that because we're ever changing, the news and life things that happen have come into our pieces because there is an incident, or like, there's shootings, or like the Me Too movement, and all those things became a part of our work. Maybe they weren't before, but they happen and then they incite something else. And I think that's something that makes it allows it to be authentically intersectional instead of like, I think there's still strategy, and Alex is really good at being able to see like who's not at the table, what are we missing, how can we dig deeper, so pushing us deeper into those dialogues and to open our own to see our own blind spots or privileges, and so we're just kind of knowing that we're able to grow in that way. And I think that's a healthy balance of being intentional about who's at the table, who's not at the table, who should be at the table, how can we include without tokenizing, but with genuinely engaging people that we come across and we want to be part of our community.
Thank you all so much for answering that question. I guess the next sort of thing that I want to get into is sort of this idea that unfortunately a lot of entertainment today focuses on and centers around like the white cisgender heterosexual male. And you can see this not only in like a lot of movies, but also in theater, unfortunately, and other aspects of art as well. And because Teatro Luna sort of stands like for the exact opposite of all of that, like, woman, BIPOC, genderqueer, queer in general. How have you found certain setbacks in like the professional setting, as well as places where you stood firm in your belief and it helped you grow with like sort of like the morals that you've set for the foundation?
I could say this might sound weird, but I think having these values instilled in me and being so much more aware than I would have ever been by being a part of this company has helped me in the corporate world a lot. And unfortunately, has only made me more shocked when something does go awry because I've become so used to standing in who I am, um, regardless of what the world thinks of me or sees me. And I have found that I've only been able to reflect on that recently, but to have been so incredibly freeing that when you believe a truth about yourself and the way you walk this earth, people have no other choice but to believe it too. If you just inherent, I'm not saying that's, this is the cure, just be yourself, by any means, but especially for, someone like me who has never seen someone who looked like them in leadership positions or on TV or even in plays and being able to create stories that are based on our own truths. I've been able to take that with me and just constantly like stand in my truth that I am worthy of this because I have done this and I won't accept otherwise, and it has allowed me to really use this corporate world 100% to my advantage, which I know is a very privileged place to be in. Um, but I've learned my experiences have vastly differed from a lot of my colleagues who look like me, and um, and I can't not give any credit to being able to pursue a creative path alongside this to be able to influence one and the other, and that's just something I feel like if everyone just got some kind of ensemble training, the world would be a better place, I promise. Um, because it just teaches you so much about how to work with others and how to just see others. It has not just for my own advancement, but to really see people, as people, not just this person who I sit next to, all of my coworkers, every friend I've made in LA, I've collaborated with in some way or another, and I don't think I would have been able to do that had I not learned about the power of ensemble work.
Thank you so much for that remarkable answer.
I think I try not to look at it as what we do versus the mainstream, although like a tagline for a long time was redefining the mainstream. Koya Paz, one of the founders, created that, which I love. But and the everybody here, I'll tell you, I really struggle because it is the thing that makes me the most depressed, feeling how unseen the work of these amazing women is and continues to be, and not just these women, but so many women. And I celebrate every time like Arata Blank comes out and just has this like phenomenal hit film. But I also know the 30 years that were before that film for Rada. Do you know what I mean? Like for all of us. And it is hard. It is hard because you want to celebrate the blessings, but when we do, and the wins, but when we do, we just continue to center the white gaze and the white frame and the white rules. And like, so I try to really spend my time in this future that is yet to exist. But like as an artist and as a leader and as somebody who's trying to redefine how we make shape and how we collaborate, I have to try to my metrics have changed. They are a metric that doesn't exist somewhere else. So I have had to learn, and I'm still very much learning how to find the value internally rather than externally. And it's very difficult. It's very hard. It's very challenging, especially when you're just talking about like being under-resourced, underfunded, all of that. So I feel like I am constantly, daily being reminded of why I do what I do when I just see the rest of the world, you know? An example, a recent an anecdote, because I think they're always really helpful, is some amazing humans who make theater recently they had a moment where they saw me and they were like, no one in this movement is disposable, and no matter what is changing or happening. And it was, I can't really go into the whole story, or I would, but I just started crying when these people that I have so much respect for were like, we need you in this room, after I was being asked to leave a room. And it reminded me, this is why we have a set of values that we abide by. This is why we have a set of values that guide us, that are a North Star, because moments like this are going to happen. And sometimes you're not going to have friends that see you, colleagues that see you, and you're going to have to stand alone in that choice. And I think everybody here has probably been in that moment. But I continue to remaining a part of that moment, because like, it is not healthy to do that journey by yourself, but to do it here with a group of women who have shared in those experiences and can lift you right back up, and who can say, no, tomorrow we start again. The journey starts again tomorrow and again the next day. So for me, I try to think about it a little bit more like, it is not when is that going to happen, or if, because it's going to happen, but like, how will I get up? How will I redefine what I am seeing as a celebration or a value or a thing to uplift, which maybe or maybe is not the answer to your question, but it's kind of where I just started going.
That was an amazing response. Thank you so much for that. I know that when I was writing this question, I was thinking a lot of, so I consider myself, like, the reason why I sort of went into like theater arts in general is because there's a lot of things that I'm interested in theater. So like, not just acting, but I also have like a major interest in writing as well as like artwork. And I didn't want to like limit myself in any way. And when I was thinking of this question, I was thinking of like the stories that I envision and the stories that I write. And I noticed about how I never write with the white cishet male in mind. Like, I have no interest in it. I was like, there's too many stories of that you already have out there. Why would I need to write another one for you? I'm writing for me. So I star a lot of Black queer young women in like what I'm writing. And I include like a lot of other like trans folks, or I try to make it look like the people that surround me. So like, I have like a lot of friends from a variety of different like cultures and ethnicities, and somewhere along like the trans or gender spectrum. And I don't write with them in mind because I don't necessarily care about them. When it comes down to it, I'm like, I don't care how you view what I'm writing or what the stories that I want to get out, because in a sense, I'm not writing for you. I'm writing for them. I'm writing for my friends. I'm writing for people that look like me and people that are like me, in a sense. So when you're talking about like, this is the future that I want, and so I'm making it basically, and I'm paving the way myself. I'm not necessarily paying attention to the hullabaloo of Hollywood or whatever it is. Like, that hit it on the head basically, of like what I was sort of looking for in an answer. Cause I'm like, yes, I've already, like, I'm looking at all the work that you guys have done already, and I'm admiring all of it and just excited for all of it, because I'm like, this is what I want. This is what I like to see. So I'm just like fangirling internally, if I'm being completely honest. But yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Sorry, I want to hear from other people, but just kind of to respond. We're in a very unique moment where I think we are seeing the efforts of the last decade somewhat come in terms of the art, like, but trust that it's gonna revert. Right? Like, the like, oh my God, now we want to center folks of color because it's hot right now, it's trendy right now. And I think all of us who are trying to do something different, we need to really arm ourselves, because when the heat cools down, I'm not talking about like the march, the civil up, we're not moving back from that, like socially, but in theater, I already feel it. So like I consult with some major PWIs right now around EDI. The difference from the energy in July to even just now, December, I'm like, not even 6 months, y'all. Not even 6 months. So I know what's coming a year down the line, where, and so how do I hold that and also say, no, even more energy to this work and to celebrating and uplifting? And I think it's why we talk about, like, we've really moved away from thinking of ourselves as a theater company, because the theater cannot hold us. And in many, like, because the theater has not made its case to I'm just going to speak from a US perspective. Theater has not made its case for why it is essential to our humanity, to our healing, to exist. And so if we keep trying to just be a theater company, no one cares. And we have things that we want to offer people, gifts for people, that we have to almost move away from the title of theater. So as we think about art making and community building, that is what we're thinking about. How do we show people that theater can hold them, but just not call it theater? So I just wanted to get that in there.
I wanted to hop on the co-opting language and movement in order to get into what's hot right now. I don't really, okay, to answer the first question. I think we all think, I could say, is that 2020 was a year. And is that safe to say? Okay, cool, great. And I think when something that, yes, these are our values, it's sisterhood first, right? It is folks first. What does that look like in practice? How has that held us behind? We decided to pay our artists before we pay our rent. We decided to keep meeting. We decided to keep getting in touch. We decided to, whatever resources we had, this is what we'll expend on, right? And, there's ups and downs to everything, right? But something that doesn't change is that we must put ourselves first. As an ensemble, as individuals. And I'm not just talking about like, just money, just like all of that, but it is also, all of us had like different issues obviously pop up in 2020. And like, how does that affect us? And I think like what we kind of did, because we just can't stop, won't stop, is what does stillness look like in a moment? Did we really stop? No, but we took a little, just a little bit less, and we're not here like kind of like, oh, we had to cancel this, we had to cancel that. It's like, oh shit, this is happening. Okay, how do we continue to just know that as artists, as people, as this, what does that look like in 2020? Maybe it's just gathering. Maybe it's just sitting in silence, right? And in terms of like, what being seen and not seen, like sometimes what matters is being seen by each other. I'm sure we've all been on Zoom calls where we've all seen each other cry. Yes. So I think when, in like, what does that like hold us back or anything else? It's like, people will continue to co-opt different language and will continue to do different things in order to stay hip, relevant, get that funding money and say these are their values. But I think for us, that was never in question, right? So I'll just leave that there before ramble on. But yes.
Thank you so much for that. I know that like this year specifically, it's been hard for like me to be able to like step back and be like, look, I am at my limit. I can't like, you know, it's not only was it like the summer of like the civil unrest and like the continuation of like the second wave, I guess you could say, of Black Lives Matter movement, but also with COVID and like moving online for school, there just seemed to be like a lot of people that just expected me to be able to like keep going. And like I had like written this like play on social justice, and like one of my teachers was like encouraging me like, keep going with this, let's go. And I was like, this, you're taking a lot out of me right now, and I'm kind of at my limit. And it took a while for me to be able to say like, I need a second, that sort of thing. So I'm totally understanding and on the same wavelength of you in regards to like being able to take a breath before we can like delve deep into the work. But you guys have been doing the work. You guys have been sharing these values that you've stood firm in. And I think that's extremely admirable, but also in sense of like taking care of yourselves. I really I like that.
Yeah, I think it's you learn the difference between like those who are just interested in theater as a form of like monetary entertainment and like a capitalistic venture versus the true, I don't want to say true artist, the true artist and true meaning of theater is for like true expression and humanity and connecting and understanding, trying to understand the time. And even was Toni Morrison, it was recently by Toni Morrison, just talking about like this crazy narrative of like the starving artist and like the ones who make it, and like if you're lucky, you're legendary after you're dead, and like, or how like in literary critics, it's like you can be a literary critic but never have been a writer, and like how it's in the success of a writer's work is in the hands of someone who's never birthed or gone through the process of writing. And I think, which is really not even admirable, but like true to form, or as it should be, for the way Luna has said, who are we in this time? Who are we in this season of like 2020? And like what, you know, like what is our actual function, and how are we providing a need and seeing it, but actually wanting to do something about it. And I've seen other theater struggle and like not surprised at where they are to even find an authentic, empathetic apology or outreach, because it was never about the people. It was never about the art. It was just about the entertainment. It was about, you know, the accolades. And I think it's a maybe a blessing and a curse. Not really a curse, but it's like, you know, to be, because has it to be is it Du Bois? Like to be a Negro and relatively conscious is to be in a rage all the time. Like that's what it's like, you know, it is that sense of like, it gives you clarity to see things as they are, and you get to call them out. Whether you do that verbally or you're at a table and you're like, this is hilarious. Like y'all trying to create a safe space. You know, the first thing about creating a safe space, like you're actually causing more trauma than actually creating a safe space. But it's encouraging because, you know, like it can be done, and it can be done in a healthy manner. And so, but whereas before you just thought this is the way it is, and you accepted this, and then you accept this toxic environment of like white to patriarchy, capitalist society situation. And so yeah, I think it's liberating to be a part of this work and a part of Teatro Luna and what we do, and it gives you agency, and it, like Elizabeth said, it gives you community and sisterhood. And as Alex said, like we can't, particularly as like women of color, we just can't do this work alone. We can't. Healing is like, you know, part is a communal process, and so, yeah, that's what it's helped. It's helped and encourage you because you're like, okay, I'm not crazy because other people see this too. Like it's not just me. Like.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Thank you all for your answers. They were really amazing, truly. I think I'd like to start talking about some of like the work that you guys have been doing right now. I saw that like, you know, just this past week, I think it was Thursday, that there was like Talking While Female storytelling session that had like Kelley's, you wrote it and performed it, and it featured other artists, including like Alex and such. Am I correct in this?
So
I love that.
One of those, well, the new tradition in the virtual space is like essentially Kelley, because she's one of our best poets, is going to write a poem on the theme, because the theme is different every time. And then we'll collectively, really, Christina does all the work on making the video that goes with the poem. So it's kind of like a little teaser to the event, but it's the storytelling event that Christina was talking about, our monthly, where we bring original stories, different storytellers every time. Yeah.
Thank you. I remember looking at this and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so interesting. Because I know when it was on the website, it was describing it as like when it was, of course, we can't right now because COVID, but like you guys would travel around and also take like local artists and such. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. That kind of reach is remarkable. But I was wondering, like, not only with this, but I also saw like a snippet of like the Lost in Translation rehearsal. And I was wondering if you guys could sort of like talk about how has like the rehearsals for not only that, but also like the Talking While Female sort of like shifted because of COVID-19 and like following like guidelines and restrictions and that sort of thing, as well as like how has it affected the work itself?
Yeah, so we're doing nothing in person. And so I'll just go back. Let's take us back to March. Elizabeth had just come into town early February. We had it's just so sad. We had just gone through, first of all, this is the first time we had a project that was funded by a funder in like, I don't know, 6 years. So it was so exciting. We had money to pay people, like legit money, like good money to pay for them for their time in theater money. You know what I mean? And we had just gone through like a huge casting. I don't know the word in English, un quilombo. It was just a mess. Every week it was like changing. We got our final cast, and maybe 2 weeks later, COVID hit, and people hadn't fully closed yet. But we were like, we're not stupid. Like, we're shutting. Our work, especially where it's like literally get your sweat dripping on me. Let me put my head between your like it's very physical. So we were just not going to take the risk. And so because we were already in a virtual writing intensive for the show, we just kept that going, but with the new cast. And so we're like, oh, we'll get through this, a couple weeks of this, and then we'll be fine, and we'll get back to in person. And then we're like, oh yeah, that's not going to happen. So we really started to try to rehearse it virtually. And at a certain point, we're just like, let's just pause. There's too many unknowns. We finally let go of the theater we had rented for the thing. It was going to be in June, July. And we're like, let's just like put it back on pause. And let's figure out what we can do online for people. And that's really where Elizabeth, I'm going to kind of toss it over to you to talk about how Write With Us, that was really the first thing. And then Being in Your Body. And then we'll get to like how we then brought back Talking While Female. Does that work, everybody, as a way to talk about it? Okay.
Yeah, so I went in early February and I left end of May. That's when we're like, it's just so funny. Anyway, so like Alex mentioned, we love Zoom. I'm an antsy person, so I will be constantly moving and fluctuating. So, but we always, like, I think we really loved our space. Like, how do we engage with our audience, with our community? How do we build with that? How do we, like, kind of share like what we do during our rehearsals for like writing and stuff like that with other people. You know what I mean? And
in the moment where they need help processing the chaos.
Yeah. So we try to do that via Instagram posts, and you know, we got real deep too soon. We got real deep too soon, and we're like, oh, I don't know how do we, you know, how do we do it? And we're like, you know what, let's keep it simple. Let's use IG Live. Let us use our friend IG Live. So basically, we did like try doing like Write With Us Thursday, which is what we do kind of like in rehearsal or in ensemble practice. It's like facilitating writing prompts. And that begins with like, hey, let's just do a free write. What is going on in your mind, right? And like, obviously, like, you know, there's limitations to IG Live, right? And so we're like, let's just do it via writing prompts. Let's just do it where let's just use a comment section. And it's simple, yet we built like this little beautiful writing community. And like, there's this phrase that Lisa Ann shared. I forgot who the person who said this. El papel aguanta todo. The paper holds everything, right? So whatever you have, it could hold it. And so I think we just did our 60th. Yeah, we did. We did our 60th episode last Thursday. So that's something that we've just kept on going as a processing thing on IG, and we've all shared really hosting it. So that's been really nice. And through that, we're like, well, how do we expand on this? Because, you know, still schedules, other things online. We still got to work around that. So we're like, how do we also do that Facebook? How do we expand on that to be a larger program or section or just like time? And so Alex and Lisa Ann, they started doing really creating Being Your Body, right? Because I think you know, Alex can expand on why being in your body, right? It's like, oh, the thing that you have right now, and everything's about like so much. Let me just not get into like how body and emotion, you know, like I think where the stagnation lives in your body, also like how do you release that, right? And so this Being in Your Body is series where bringing on women of color academics to host an hour-long session around a theme, right? So there was different themes surrounding being in your body as well. Like one that stood out to me, scars are stories. Stories are scars tell. And I thought that was a really beautiful one. And just like how we also invite different women of color academics, and I think there's like a whole thing within that was really good to just learn and like just share space within that. And so I'm like, okay, great. We're getting our wheels turning. The oils are moving. And so like, okay, how do we relaunch Talking About Female? And like Christina and Kelley have been doing an amazing job, really like turning it virtual. And this like, so Kelley is an amazing Halloween queen. And so for October, that's one, hence the skulls. I peeped that real quick. But like that was like, how do you do like the liveness, the vivation, ay, no sé cómo decirlo en español, como the experience, there we go, experience of like being in person online. And I think that was a really beautiful example of like how to really connect in different ways virtually. And it was all like through the little build up of like, let's just take little steps together. Anyway, yes.
Yeah. Just to kind of summarize, and Kelley, I'd love to hear your thoughts too. I think organizationally, we knew really quickly. We know that the rest of the world was suffering in huge ways. Of course, we were obsessed with what's happening in the hospitals, but we also knew like our entire field is on hold, and our entire field is also comprised of mostly already in crisis BIPOC artists who were already no access to healthcare, all the things that I don't even need to go into. And so we became obsessed for a while with only advocating for like freelance artists, specifically BIPOC artists. And so that we entered every room advocating like, I don't give a shit about your theater and its rent. Pay your freaking artists. Like, and so that it went from there to like slowly we could then focus back on our own art, but we're like, we can't even worry about that right now. Like right now we have a bunch of people to like scream a message to. And we have the access to those rooms. And so we have to enter those rooms saying like, what the hell are you even talking about? Having a crisis meeting about when will theater be back on the stage when we have artists who can't even go to the grocery store right now, right? We owe them. Because the reason you have a building is because of the work that went unpaid from them for so long, right? So, and in many ways, we're still in there, right? We're still in that place.
Yeah, like in the beginning, it was nice to have, we're still meeting for the times, and our amazing movement, like our choreographer, Issa McKeever, like she would do movement for us. And so we'd be able to, it was like the first time that felt like we were actually like not back in the theater, but just like, okay, like this first time I moved my body in like weeks or like all day or like, and so it was nice to kind of have something to look forward to that was still on schedule. And then we said, okay, well, the pandemic was just getting out of hand, and we put a hold on that for some of them, and we still met on other ones, and that was so nice of still being able to dialogue and connect and to create and having writing assignments and then write with us came about. And that was amazing because that gave everyone opportunity to come in and to kind of engage. And it's amazing what you can how you can still create a sense of like community and a synergy of energy through YouTube, through Zoom, and like these online platforms. And so it just felt where you're on some Zoom calls and you're like, oh my God, I'm like so exhausted. But like after our meetings or after our events, like people are like, thank you. Like I feel re-energized. Like if I had a headache and we'd meet, like I'd leave and like my headache would like dull down. I feel so much better. And so that's what's, been really nice through this time is that like if I ain't got anything else, there's like Luna meetings or Luna, like our performances and our audience and connecting with them and our community and stuff, and that has been awesome. And yeah, and I've seen other theater companies I'm a part of like not be able to do that, which I think is just nice, just about ensemble work in general, always thinking of community constantly. How can we be there for community, for our people? And I believe that even though as an artist, like there's this pressure to like, oh, you have to write every day or you have to act all the time or sing every day. It's like sometimes like you're creating in those moments of hiatus, like in the work that we're doing now and communicating with each other and the talks and like what we read or the times we cry, like we're still creating. We're just feeling that well so that when we do get to be back on stage, it'll just be immaculate because we'll have so much to pull from. And so that's what I see in this time that's happening, that like this is not in vain, and it'll be really exciting when we get to get back. And also just to see the ingenuity of like how to create awesome work on an online platform. We had like a painter come on and like create art as people were talking, and like just to be more engaging and how we do like live and how we deal with movement and screen share. Like yeah, so it was just cool.
Thank you so much for that. I'd like to get into, so I'm, of course, doing this interview as the final project for my Latinx Spirit and Drama class, which is led by Daphne Secray. So she is the professor that reached out to all of you and was like, would you guys like to have an interview? And one question that has been asked throughout the class is like, what is Latinx theater? And so I kind of wanted to ask you all, like, what do you all think Latinx theater is, and where do you see the future of Latinx theater going?
I'm laughing because I don't know whether to be honest or not.
Hun, be honest. Thank you. I love honesty.
Okay, I'm gonna say I would love for Latinx theater as it currently is to stop and just go away. Be dead. No, I'm kidding. I think maybe the better way of saying that is I'm not interested anymore in Latinx theater that centers white body supremacy, that centers performative myths around a place that, like a mythical Mexico that doesn't actually exist, and that performs indigeneity as if it's Halloween dressing up. That is what I'm not interested in. What I am interested in moving forward is Latinx theater that is grounded and centered in its lineage, that is so old, that centers storytelling, that centers healing, that is ensemble driven, that is devised in nature, not as in nature in the earth, but that too, but that is collaborative. I'm very interested in that. I have zero interest in quote unquote Latinx theater just so it gets the sticker of Latinx, but still has a white woman directing it, or still has a person who has no relationship to the content or the themes directing it, and that erases Black bodies that are Black Latinx. That's me.
I laughed also because I don't know whether or not to say the truth. So I'm not, like Alex said, I'm not interested in like this magical person that comes in and fixes everything that happens to be indigenous. I'm not interested in the quote, I'm not interested in another La Llorona story. You know what I mean? As much as I like it, whatever, I'm like, I love this song. After a while, I'm like, okay. And I think there's a difference in like the romanticization of like what second, third generation, what Latinos here think of the countries over there, right? Because if we were to ask Latin America, what is Latino theater? It's like completely different perspectives, completely different shows. It is a lot of everything, and like to define Latinidad in a very American context, in a very white context, in order for them to be able to grapple in their mind what Latino is. I'm like, how are you going to define 27 countries? I am a colonized body, you know what I mean? Like in my phenotype and whatever it is, right? Yeah, I think for Latino theater, Latinx theater, unless we confront like within the US, unless we confront the colorism that is here, unless we confront what does it mean to be defined under this umbrella termed in Latinidad, like I'm not the same as a Cuban in Miami. You know what I mean? As clear as day, this election taught me that real quick, that's undeniable. And like, I have no interest in talking to people, like, I'll just use an example. Just because you grew up in Iowa and are, mixed of a white person and your mom is Latina, that we do not have the same experiences. You know what I mean? Like you cannot come to Chicago and say you're going to co-opt this culture here. In my experience, like, because I go, Boyle Heights, I think, like when I am very clear of like, sometimes like I really define myself as Mexican American, sometimes as Chicana, because my dad would teach me like there's a difference, and like, is it right for you to co-opt somebody else's narrative, or is this right, and so unless you know yourself and know your own, your own privileges, where you stand, like you're gonna continue to cause harm, right? And I think before I rant more, but like I think when we talk about Latinx theater, I think we talk as if it is not intersectional, as if the Black people do not exist in Latin America, as if there's not rules and regulations that really impoverish and continue to actively like put indigenous people who are still alive today in shanty towns, right? Unless we confront that, unless we do not confront our own historical genocide, then what are we here for? To talk about La Llorona? Like, no, thank you. Like, I also want to say, like, I want to honor immigrant stories. I loved it, right? But that is, how do we continue to limit ourselves, right? And I think I want to honor the history. I want to honor everything. Like, it's great. How do we continue pushing, right? How do we continue going forward and not put ourselves in a small thing, right? Because I think there's this really great, not to quote a Luna quote, but I'm gonna bring it back. One of our, somebody who used to be part of the ensemble, Christina and she's like, let nuance infuse our art, you know? And like, and that's something that we continue to advocate for, you know? And I think, you know, even now we're like, I think about, what was it? 2014, 2015, where we're like, we're not just only like Latinx theater. No, like we can't, you know, because our identities do not allow us to be like that when we walk around, right? Like if we were like, if Alex and I were to walk around like in a different, we would be perceived differently, right? And so I think that's something that we are a Latinx theater inherently because we're POC theater or BIPOC theater, but that, like, I don't know how I'm trying to say it. Like, I'm speaking in draft right now, but I think that is something that we're like, we are really taking into consideration how we really continue to move forward and like what are the stories that we tell, you know? So yes, I chose to be honest. So yes.
Kelley, do you have anything to add to that, or not really? It's okay if you don't.
I also feel like I don't feel like I should be able to speak on the future Latinx theater.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I'll say I love Latinx theater. I think we all have different definitions of what that might be. When I think about it, I think through a very international lens, which I don't find often here. I think in general, the US has we just, unlike other places, we're not part of the international theatrical landscape. But in Latin America, they don't call themselves Latinx theater, okay? So like we need to start there. And they have a long history of physical theater, of ensemble theater, of all of these other theater practices. And what happens in the United States when we try to really talk about Latinx theater in the same way that maybe Black theater tries to talk about itself, but like I think Black theater has had the time and has really done the work to define certain components that make Black theater outside of just Black bodies, right? So like, and Latinx theater, I think just is not there yet. And what happens through the Latinx lens, because Latinx isn't a race. And so it's just gotten very confused. And there's a lot of Latinos who don't understand that, who are trying to define the Latinx theater is. So we got a mess right now. But what I'm interested in is dismantling the Latinx theater that is designed for a white gaze, because that is where the harm is happening. That is why it is happening. And it also sets us as so why that's one has never really identified in that way is because like we're first an ensemble theater, we're first a devising theater, we're first a feminist theater. And often that was not always living in the world of Latinx theater. We're at Teatro, which is different. We're a Latinx theater company that is independent, that believes in being a part of a movement and is an activist body in the way Teatros have historically been. So in that part, I just want to be really clear. We super identify with that. Maybe not the machismo of that, but with that essence. Oh yes, white gaze as in Gazee. And I just want to name, because I was at a friend's house and we were revisiting Black AF. the episode, do you right? And it was the same thing when Kenya says to his daughter, like, the black gays or the white gays, and she thought he was being homophobic. I don't know why that show. That's exactly what happened this morning. See, that show is real.
No, because I was thinking, for some reason in my head, I was like, yeah, we're talking about, like, you know, white people and blah, blah. But then you say white gays, and I'm like, you're right. The white gays, they get too much head and all that crap too. I was like, they need to back off and let us tell our stories. Thank you. So I was,
that too.
But there's a truth. I mean, there is something to be said. There's something to be said because sometimes white gay males think that they're not susceptible to like white male patriarchy. It's like, but you are, because you're just, it's crazy.
Them and white women have a very special category in that.
Yes.
There's something about white, gay, liberal woman that is just like, hun, if you could just, I don't even know how to describe the vibe you're giving off right now, but this is just not it. Like, so I felt like it was fitting, even though I was wrong and off the topic in regards to white gays. I thought it was fitting into what we were talking about. I was like, yes, throw them in there too. They're problematic as well.
I love it.
I want to thank you all for joining me. I know that we went a lot over with this interview, but I thank you all for spending this time with me in this interview. I would like to leave on the note of where could people be able to find more information and stay up to date with what Luna is doing and some of the future projects you have.
Instagram is the like only thing we're good at keeping updated. So please come follow us. I think we're Instagram.com/Teatro Luna, and we're getting ready to launch a new IG dedicated to our Talking While Female series. So that's Talking While Female Institute. I think that might be wrong. It's TWF Institute, doesn't have a single post, but go find us there. And our most up-to-date website, which still is not up to date, is www.teatrolunawest.org. But yeah, find us on IG.
I'm also there on Facebook as well.
Yeah, but you know.
I just wanted to slide in and just say yes, Facebook.
No, yes, Christina's been doing the work. And then of course, if you like, I always got to push. We did an audiobook last year. As an Audible original. So go check it out. It's called Talking While Female and Other Dangerous Acts, 24 stories by Latinas, by Latinas of all colors, let me say that, and sexualities and identities and backgrounds. So go check out their stories on risk and resilience.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's so exciting. I can't wait. I will make sure as well when I put this up on YouTube that I put all that in the description down below. So thank you for joining me.